What is poverty? We are going to look at why the majority of Americans have misconceptions about poverty and how you should consider poverty. So, what actually is the opposite of poverty? Is it being rich? Is it being happy? Is it being healthy? Or is it a combination of more than just one characteristic? Like whatever the opposite of poverty is, poverty can also not be compiled as a single deficiency.
We will now discuss how we measure poverty today. We're going to first look at the OPM and the SPM. Let's think of two families, John, who has 2 little kids, and Mary, who has 2 little kids as well. If we look at John's income, he makes $22,000 a year, and Mary makes $28,000 a year. The poverty line for their situation is, let's say, $20,000 a year. If we compare the two families on income, John is doing much worse than Mary. The problem with looking just based on income is you miss in-kind and near-cash benefits the government gives, as well as non-discretionary spending, which the family has no control over. Let's look at John. John gets $3,000 a year from SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, and $3,000 in EITC, which is a government rebate on your taxes. Mary receives neither of these benefits either because she doesn't qualify or didn't even look to apply. As well, she has $4,000 every year in medical out-of-pocket expenses, also known as MOOP. She also has $3,000 a year in childcare for each of her 2 kids. Originally, we thought John's family was doing much worse than Mary's family, but when looking at in-kind, near-cash benefits, and non-discretionary spending, we can see John actually does much better for himself than Mary does. Currently, the government looks at OPM, which is only the income compared to the poverty line. There is another system called the SPM, which looks at the in-kind, near-cash, and non-discretionary spending. We can now see why the OPM, which is the way the government currently measures poverty, is not a good system. Although better, the SPM is still a binary measure, meaning you are either in poverty or out of poverty, and there is no in between. Additionally, the SPM does not look at non-material resources like a person's capabilities.
As Alec just touched upon, the binary system does not show the depth of poverty that some people face, or how close to poverty other people may be. As you can see from the drawing, some people who are not in poverty and who are above the threshold set by the OPM or SPM are still very close to being in poverty, and the binary system does not show this.
Stop right now. Get rid of any thought that income is the measure of poverty. Both the SPM and OPM measure poverty through income inadequacy, but they are both fallacies of measure, which is a term used by Nussbaum. Income alone does not define nor measure poverty. So let's try a different way of explaining poverty.
We will now talk about the difference between functionings and capabilities. Functionings are described as what a person is doing right now with their life. Capabilities, on the other hand, is what people are able to do, including what they choose not to do. To visualize this, let's think of 2 different people, one named George and one named Rob. Here the black circle shows George and Rob's capabilities, what they are able to do with their life. The blue circle shows what they are actually doing with their life, also known as their functioning. Now if we look at purely functioning, it'll appear as George and Rob are doing just as well as each other in life. In reality though, George has the opportunity to do much more than Rob, but chooses not to. Because George is able to do much more than Rob, we shouldn't look at them as equals. George could do more if he wanted to. This is why functionings is a bad way of looking at poverty. Instead, we should look at capabilities.
Economist and philosopher Amartya introduced his idea of poverty as a person not having their capabilities met. Capabilities, according to Sen, are all the beings and doings that a person is able to achieve. The key to that is able to achieve, not actually what they are achieving right now. The things that hold back people in their capabilities are social, political, cultural, and economic barriers that exist in a person's life.
Philosopher Martha Nussbaum has come up with a list of the 10 capabilities that she feels are most central to leading a life of dignity. These are the non-material, non-income specific resources that a person needs in order to live a life where all basic needs are met. These central capabilities are furnished through a person's combined capabilities, which include internal capabilities that can be trained and developed, as well as the social, political, and economic environment in which a person lives. To reiterate, a person is in poverty if he or she has to make a tragic choice and sacrifice one or more of the central capabilities. A real-life example of this would include choosing between feeding all 3 of your children or paying for your own medical out-of-pocket expenses.
There are 2 ways of measuring someone's capabilities: quantitatively and discursively. Discursively is measuring someone's capabilities through comparisons and conversations. It's practically impossible to measure poverty through discursive means. Thus, we need to measure poverty through other means, such as through quantitative and use of numbers.
Another way to measure poverty is called the HDI, also known as the Human Development Index. This index looks at 3 different factors when determining poverty. It looks at the health of a person, the education of a person, as well as their income. Currently, the HDI compares countries to countries throughout the world. But what if instead of looking at countries, we looked at a country? Now, instead of looking at just of America, what if we look at a single state, like Florida? Now let's zoom in even further, and instead of comparing states to each other, compare congressional districts to each other. Now, let's keep zooming in and look at towns. Let's compare each town to each other. Now, we can zoom in one more time and zoom all the way down into the household. This is our idea on how to measure poverty, is by using the HDI at a household-to-household basis instead of country to country. By using this household-to-household method, we are able to more fairly compare 2 different families on more than just income. Additionally, while trying to quantify all of this data, we would be able to set up a scale showing how far away from the poverty line each family is and how far the average family is away from the poverty line. To answer the first half of our original question, capabilities is the best way to define poverty. To answer the second part of our question, which is how should we measure poverty, the easy answer is the HDI. It is a practical way to measure capabilities and is easy to implement. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned why capabilities is a much better definition of poverty than basic income, and why the HDI is the best way to measure poverty.